Hi, I'm Paige Henry, the owner of Regal Financial. We proudly support the YWCA Dayton's Voices Against Violence because we know the YW plays a pivotal role in our community. This is the first discussion in a six-part series that was recorded live on October 8th. Each session highlights a specific topic and the way it intersects with domestic violence. The session you're about to watch focuses on faith communities, the gaps that exist, and some of the amazing work being done. YWCA Dayton works with a variety of faith-based organizations as they strive to meet the nuanced needs of every survivor who comes through their doors. Please join me in making a gift to ensure that the critical work continues. So go to ywcadayton.org/donate. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is up right now. I know it's pretty early in the morning, but I'm appreciate you guys for being here and taking up space. My name is Travis Richards. I'm one of the Men Together program specialists here at the YWCA Dayton. If you joined us for Voices Against Violence last year, you likely heard about Sean Foster, our keynote, speak about bringing the men together to Dayton. I'm happy to report that we started our first in-school clubs the week before last, and we'll see more than 100 boys go through the program in our first year. So definitely snaps on that. It's amazing how you see progress within this field. This morning, I have the privilege to introduce our two speakers joining us to discuss the intersection of domestic violence and faith. But before I do, I want to say thank you to our sponsors. First, thank you to Regal Financial, our sponsors for this entire event, for returning as a presenting sponsor for this second year. Secondly, I want to thank this session's sponsor, West Dayton Caravan of Churches, for supporting our faith session. We have Father Ben Spearhearty here to say a few words about their work. Father Ben.
Good morning, everyone. And I'm Father Dr. Benjamin Spearhearty. I'm the rector of St. Margaret's Episcopal Church and the president of the West Dayton Caravan of Churches, 25th Ecumenical Congregation in West Dayton. And we are honored to be part of this the faith-based segment of Voices Against Violence. Our churches are involved in a lot of work here in Dayton in terms of schooling and working with individuals who are homeless and those who are struggling. We are all over Dayton, and just want to be a part of something that makes an impact in the lives, especially of women and violence in our nation, and especially here in this region. And so we just want to be upfront and to express our support and do everything that we can within our congregations as well to make sure we can raise our voices against violence. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Ben. That was great. Thank you, Regal Financial and the West Dayton Caravan of Churches. Now to introduce our speakers. Rula Ulash. Rula Ulash is a trial attorney with experience in employment law, civil rights, personal injury, and complex commercial litigation. Ms. Ulash earned her undergraduate degree, magna cum laude, from the University of Kentucky in 2003, and her Juris Doctor from the University of Kentucky College of Law in 2006. She is licensed to practice in all states and federal courts in Kentucky and Ohio, and before the United States 6th Circuit Court of Appeals. Ms. Ulash is an active member of the legal community and the community at large. She currently serves as a chair of the National Board of Directors of the Council of American Islamic Relations, the nation's largest civil rights and advocacy group for the American Muslim community. She is also a member of the Board of Directors of the American Bar Association's Rule of Law Initiative and serves as a Kentucky delegate to the Associates House of Delegates. Ms. Ulash was recently recognized as Daughter of Greatness by Muhammad Ali Center and serves on the center's board of directors. She's definitely impressive. Ms. Ulash is also a faculty member with the Islamic Seminary of America. Next up, Ms. Darlene Hills Clink Skills. Ms. Hills Clink Skills is the founder of Start Before It Start and works to educate advocates, agencies, and spiritual communities on how to form partnerships that will strengthen our joint community response and prevention strategies to domestic violence. Darlene has been a part of the movement to end domestic violence for over 20 years. As prevention advocate, speaker, educator, survivor, she has done extensive research and writing on the topic of domestic violence in general and the prevalence of domestic violence and within the spiritual community specifically. In 2016, she was featured in the Black Enterprise magazine article called Breaking the Chains of Financial Abuse. Other accomplishments include being able to initiate the former faith-based task force at Ohio Domestic Violence Network. I will hand it over to you two to introduce yourself and talk about your work. And then Marshall will join us to moderate the panel discussion. Ms. Ulosh, why don't you go first?
Thank you, Travis. Thanks for the kind introduction. Good morning, everyone. And good morning, Darlene. It's an honor to be on the panel with you. I'm really excited to see that the discussion today for this day-long program is beginning with a focus on faith. I think it's an important foundational place for us to start the conversation. So when I saw the program, despite not being the earliest morning person, I liked that and appreciated that we were starting with the morning discussion. And just as kind of how our lives can intersect in different ways, the title of the program today, Voices Against Violence, actually reflects, or it's the same title of a program that I was heavily involved with for a number of years. As Travis kindly noted, I volunteer with the American Bar Association, and a number of years ago, the Bar Association nationally had a program called Voices Against Violence, and it was started within the association's Young Lawyers Division. And at that time, I was involved through the Kentucky Bar Association as well. We were able to bring that program local and encourage a lot of attorneys who practice outside of family law. And as you may have noted from my bio, I don't practice family law often. I don't handle domestic violence cases frequently, but through this program, it's permitted me and a number of other attorneys in our area to provide services to survivors of violence and to do so in a pro bono manner. So just a lot of things to reflect on as we start the morning. From a faith perspective, I think I just wanted to share a few things, and then I look forward to hearing Darlene and having Marshall join us for some questions and answers. One of the things that's been a challenge, and I suppose it's a challenge that I appreciate in some ways, is the fact that we are accepting as a community, and I think communities at large, that domestic violence knows no background, it knows no limits. It's in every type of home, it's in every racial, ethnic, socioeconomic, kind of familial structure. Unfortunately, we find it in all those places. One of the challenges that we've had as advocates within the Muslim community has been a denial and just a lack of awareness by a number of people. And having spoken to fellow colleagues in other faith communities that are doing this type of work, they've also shared that seems to be a similar pattern, that faith, not just faith leaders, but people of particular faiths, especially when they have knowledge of their faith traditions and understand restrictions on these type of actions, would then say, well, that's not something that's a problem for us. And for Muslims, and I'll speak in the kind of Dayton, Cincinnati, greater Cincinnati area, that's certainly been true, where there's a sense of denial. And when a number of us started to approach faith leaders and leaders at mosques and communities in our areas to say, there are some steps that we need to take to provide support for our community members who are challenged by these issues and who are working and struggling to overcome them, we need to be advocates to provide support. I can't tell you the number of people that said, oh, sister, that's not a problem we have in our community. And it was a humbling reminder that the first step has to be acceptance, that these are challenges, as I said, in any community. I appreciated that people would say, well, within the construct of our faith, it's impermissible for one to act in a violent way against anyone, let alone a spouse. There's an Islamic tradition and belief that the Prophet referenced, saying that marriage is half of your faith. And a lot of Muslims interpret that to understand it to mean that in order to be, when you're in a partner relationship, that you're accounted for how you treat your partner, up to it being half of how you're judged and you're assessed for your actions. And so people resisted the notion that, well, there can't be domestic violence. Look how important it is in our faith for people to be treated, well, and I could go through all the details, but what was very clear is we had work to do. So the first step was pushing the barrier of people not even wanting to have the conversation because they were in denial that this was a problem in our community. And it took some relationship building with individuals who were working as advocates together on these issues. Certainly not just attorneys, people who have social work background, counseling background, educators, and people across the board. And what we did in our area was also incorporate in the faith leaders and have them learn with us and buy into the need within our community to address the challenges that many women, but men and women were facing as far as domestic violence goes. So we started there, and that gave us an opportunity to then work on empowerment within the community, education. Those were steps that were important for us to take. One thing I wanted to note in additional as a unique challenge for the Muslim community to these issues has been our community's multi-ethnic background. We are an incredibly diverse community, which I always appreciate and love. I miss going to mosques these days due to COVID. I haven't been in some time. One of the things that I often feel when I'm in a community setting with members of the Muslim community is just, it catches my breath how diverse we are and racially and ethnically diverse. But what that also means is we have a large number of Muslims who are Black Muslims. We have a large number of Muslims who are immigrant. And what we found in some of the work that we've done, we've learned that the intersection of other societal issues with domestic violence and how that can impact a survivor's ability to get past and work through the challenges that she or he is experiencing so they can move forward. And I pointed out specifically the Black community and the immigrant community for a very real reason. What we've seen is with a number of Black Muslims, there's a reluctance to involve law enforcement. And we understand certainly, I personally understand where that comes from. It's a resistance to policing of Black communities. And I've had countless women tell me that they don't want to involve law enforcement because of the concern of how things may escalate. Oftentimes, if there are children involved, the people are thinking about the future of their children. And that can be a challenge in terms of how to provide proper services and respecting the limitations that the person's setting on the types of services she or he's willing to engage in. And it's for a different reason, but it's a similar experience that I've seen with the immigrant community, where people in particular, if they're not in a green card or certainly not a citizen status, but where they're still in that space of in the process of having more recently immigrated to the US or having working on status or being in a space where they're in one status and with hopes to move into a different immigration status. A lot of times the violent partner will use immigration as a threat and as a holding it over people's heads. And that's certainly something that we've seen as a challenge for us. So when we talk about information and empowerment, part of that has been to reach out and ensure that people in our community know what their rights are with regard to their various statuses as far as immigration goes, so that that's not a challenge that they have moving forward, or at least it's something that they can start to understand. There are legal ways to remain in the US, even if they have currently have status through the violent partner. And then the last thing I'd like to share, and then I'll turn it back to either Travis or Darlene, is that one step that we took that we saw make a big change was utilizing the spacing in our community centers. So in the mosques, we have separate spaces for men and women's preparation for prayer area. So that can be the space where there's restrooms, where they take shoes off, leave coats, and a relatively inexpensive and easy step we took was to put up information for people in those separate spaces, so that was an area where even in the most controlling of partner relationships, they found themselves away from their partner, and there was access to information that they may not have otherwise had. And we kind of did that as a Voices Against Violence within the Muslim community program, and we found it to be successful in giving people a chance to get the information that they needed of who they could call if they, were ready to make the step to try to get help and move out of the challenging situation that they were in. So those are just a few initial thoughts I wanted to share, and I'm looking forward to a broader conversation.
Thank you, Rula. I'm going to share my screen.
You should be able to do that now.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, good morning, and thank you all for having me be a part of this important conversation, and especially thanks to Rula, because you gave such an excellent overview of challenges that we face in the faith community. And in my Christian community, when you were talking, I'm like, same thing. So that was an excellent overview. And in reference to that, I want to move on to the topic of the intersection of domestic violence and faith. And for the concept of intersectionality was introduced by Kimberly Crenshaw in 1996. Intersectionality seeks to build bridges between stakeholders in order to address structural inequalities and systematic oppression. In this brief presentation is about the intersection of domestic violence and faith, and it offers a way to build bridges between stakeholders through mutual respect, partnerships, and sharing information that is integrated into practice. The stakeholders are the domestic violence prevention agencies and the advocates, and the faith-based community. These two stakeholders intersect, as we see here in this diagram. They intersect because each foster relationships, support, and advocacy for individuals who experience domestic violence, as well as accountability for perpetrators of domestic violence. So the diagram that I have here, it shows on the one side, domestic violence prevention agencies, and it acknowledges the different methods and practices that are unique to the domestic violence agencies. And then on the other side, we have the faith-based communities, and it acknowledges the different doctrines and practices that are unique to the faith community. Historically, these unique methods and practices have often intersected in conflict. Many times this conflict results when the facts that we have differences are not acknowledged. And conflict may result because of the absence of mutual respect for each other in spite of our differences. However, this intersection offers a perspective that will foster positive outcomes, because the faith community is for the most part, is a important missing piece in the joint community efforts to end domestic violence and whatnot, because of our differences a lot of times. So we want, in this intersection, I want to suggest ways that we can create safe spaces for each stakeholder to create safe spaces to share information and resources, which will ultimately increase each stakeholder's capacity to advocate for those experiencing domestic violence and to integrate that shared information into their community or agency practice. And so in the middle here of the intersection of faith communities and domestic violence prevention agencies and all the people who work in that area to assist and help survivors. The first thing you see here is acceptance and respect. And that's a very important component, because we need to accept that we have these different methods and practices. And once we do that, make up in our mind to respect each other in spite of the differences that we have. And when we do that, we can think about doing intentional partnerships with each other. And that means that it's not going to be an easy thing, but it's a very important thing to help survivors who are suffering in our communities, right? Because if we don't get together and empower our capacity to help them, then our survivors will be lacking. And it will take longer to, process towards helping them, assisting them, and ending domestic violence. So once we are intentional in forming partnerships, then we need to, in doing that, focus on sharing information. Instead of focusing on the differences that we have, we want to focus on sharing information and the things that we agree on, which are in faith communities, they definitely agree that domestic violence is wrong. So sharing information will help our capacity to assist in that area. And then we have, after we focus on just sharing information with each other and resources, then each stakeholder can integrate what we learn from each other into our practices. And that being said, it's like we need to understand that faith communities are strategically situated throughout the world, throughout our country, and most importantly, throughout our individual communities. Faith communities contain many resources that are already in place and can be utilized to significantly assist survivors. So that's why it's important to, for us to reach out to each other, right? And intentional partnerships and shared information and resources between domestic violence prevention agencies and helping professionals and the faith community will propel our capacity for survivor services, safety, care, and elimination of cultural norms that make it okay for perpetrators to abuse. So domestic violence agencies will be able to utilize the vast resources in the faith community that are already in place to provide referral services and care to those most vulnerable. And I just advocate for us working together so we can do more and really advance our skills in helping our survivors. Our focus needs to be on them and not what our differences are. Thank you.
Well, thanks to both of you so much for sharing. We're thrilled to have both of you here this morning with all of the wonderful experience and expertise you have in this space. And so I have a few questions here prepared for you, but I again want to invite all of our attendees, if you have any questions that have popped up or that do pop up at some point, feel free to either use the chat function or the Q&A function here in Zoom to ask those questions, and we will try to maintain some time at the end to get to those. So Rula and Darlene, starting a little more broadly, how do you see physical and emotional health being connected to spiritual health?
Thanks, Marshall. I can go first and just want to thank Darlene for that excellent presentation. I hope it's okay. I took a picture of your slide because I thought it was so helpful to see the circles together. Marshall, to your question, I think it's deeply entrenched and all interconnected that one, having the capacity to be in good physical and emotional health connects to the spiritual health that they have. And I often talk to people about how, people will say, oh, I'm struggling with faith right now, or I'm having a kind of spiritual crisis. And then when we talk a little bit more, and I'm talking about myself first here, then you think about, oh, have I been taking care of my physical health, or what's been going on emotionally? And they're all so connected that I appreciate the question and kind of the global aspect of it, because that's where we start to become challenged as people of faith and in so many other ways as well. So it's important to maintain balance. And that's one of the things that I personally appreciate about our faith, is that there is a sense of balance. There's a beautiful faith tradition that talks about how different parts of us have rights over us, and our bodies have rights over us, and our minds have rights over us, and our spiritual health has rights over us. And I try to keep myself first reminded of that, and then share with others as well.
The way I think, thank you, Rula. The way I think that physical and emotional health are connected to spiritual health is, first of all, the part about the spiritual health is just like a simple definition of what spirituality is just, it gives us, it gives people, each person, purpose and meaning to life, right? So it's important to understand that everybody has a spiritual component. And a lot of people process that and get support for that in a faith community. So the spiritual component is connected to the physical and the emotional health, because you know, they teach us all the time how, like, if something happens to you physically, you get, as an example, you get a wound, then that has something to do with your emotions, okay? So as like in domestic violence, when somebody is harmed emotionally, people are treating them badly and stuff, it makes them think about what their purpose and meaning to life, you know, it has effects on that. So as Rula was saying, it's important to keep a balance in between all that, and for, as we advocate for survivors and whatnot, that we realize that spiritual component is very important. It should not be ignored. And we need to work together so we can have referral to spiritual communities so that can be processed and made healthy, as well as the physical and the emotional health.
Thank you both for your responses. I think that's so pertinent that sort of when you have these three aspects of health, if any one is out of balance, they all become out of balance. And that's hard for a person to recover from. So moving a little more specifically into the intersection of domestic violence and faith, can you describe what legal obligations exist? And Rula, this might be your bailiwick as an attorney. What legal obligations exist, if any, for faith leaders to report abuse? And do you think that helps or hinders the work of faith leaders?
So as the attorney, I will say sometimes it depends. Such a classic attorney answer, but I think really what in most areas, what would be true is that faith leaders have kind of a privilege with those who are congregants who come to them for faithful guidance. And so unless or until there's an imminent sense of danger, unless or until they know of an action that if they share may put someone into immediate physical harm, my understanding is that they don't have a legal obligation to report violence. And it's probably even arguable in those scenarios, as long as the faith leader is not an otherwise officer of the court or social worker or some other person with a heightened reporting responsibility. So it really is, for those who are watching, if you're in a certain role, it's probably good to check with local partners to make sure you know what the legal obligations are. But what people often understand is that when they're speaking with their faith community leader, imam, priest, preacher, rabbi, etc., that they are in a space where it's kind of a safe space. They don't believe or perceive that information to be shared. And I think it can be helpful in a way because it allows for people to feel like they can share openly without having the sense of this is going to get out, people are going to learn. It'll feel like it's a protected area for them to share something that's oftentimes a deep secret and something that's challenging to talk about. So it provides, I think, the faith leader an opportunity because they learn a piece of information that maybe no one else, I mean, not a parent, not a best friend, not a sister, may learn. So what I often, when I talk to faith leaders, try to encourage is, sure, know what your legal obligations are, but know what the resources are that you can refer someone to when they share this information. Don't let it just be a conversation that's limited to, you as a faith leader. Recognize where your limitations are as far as not being a licensed social worker or, all the different legal or not legal, but different professional expertise that may assist someone in a situation like that. Be a catalyst that if someone has shared and revealed this, and you have their trust, you could then, be somebody that could help change the situation by offering resources that can help the person moving forward.
Darlene, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yes. There is also, I know it's different. The legal implications are different in every state. So you need to know, of course, what goes on in your state. And I was understanding that there is a mandatory reporting feature for clergy. So just make sure you get that information. A good place to go for that information is the Center for Family Safety and Healing in Columbus. On their website, they have a page that tells you specifically the obligations for clergy in reference to the legal part of it. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for that resource. For those viewing this session, we will get that website and make sure that we share that with everyone after the fact. So sort of following up on that, and Darlene, we'll start with you this time. What are some ways that community partners can help faith leaders to address domestic violence?
Thank you. Well, like I was talking about in my presentation, it's very important that community partners partner with faith communities. That would significantly help them to address domestic violence, because the community partners can share their areas of expertise surrounding the basis about domestic violence, how it affects survivors, because we've been spending years with doing that, and they're expert in that. And then when they partner, then it's going to empower faith communities to understand that and be able to use the vast amount of resources that they have in their community for domestic violence people in their community, as well as in the general community, because they are already set for that. So it's just, I think that's so much important, where we can help a significant amount of people if we just partner together. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that that's one of your top areas of passion, Darlene, and the work that you've been doing for 20 some odd years. So it's great to hear that from you. So many times religious traditions can be misinterpreted by abusers to justify their behavior. And this exists within all faith traditions, certainly. First of all, have you seen examples of this? I would guess that both of you have. And secondly, what are some ways that faith leaders can honor both their faith traditions while ensuring peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all of the members of their community?
Marshall, from my perspective, I absolutely have seen this far too many times. It frankly pisses me off every time I see it, but it is a reality, and I think you're very likely right that it's within every faith community. That's a challenge that we have. One of the things that the organization I work with, CARE, one of the things that we've tried to do is empower community leaders, and specifically faith leaders, to use their opportunity. For the Muslim community, the kind of sermon time would be a Friday afternoon prayer. This is pre-COVID times, but now a lot of those have turned into online Zoom type sessions as well. So they are still happening in different formats. But what we've tried to encourage is using that precious time where you have the community's attention to talk about very real and relevant issues that are current challenges the community is facing. And this is one of the things that we've put on that list. And we oftentimes will share recommended topics to people. As many of us maybe who speak publicly sometimes know, oftentimes you're looking for what topic should I cover. So we try to fill that gap of, well, if you're wondering, here are some things that you should talk about. And in addition to social justice issues and current criminal justice type challenges, one of the things that we encourage frequently is properly sharing what the faith tradition is, so that people within and within the prayer space, wherever it is, but people that are hearing the sermon can understand that there's a separation between what's happening to them and what the faith would encourage or permit or allow. Because not only do people within the faith tradition justify their abusive behaviors personally, but they also use it as a power and control over the person that they're abusing, trying to make it seem as though this is something somehow permitted within the faith or a right that the person has. So it's important to give knowledge, not just to the person who's trying to justify his or her behavior, but to the person who's being subjected to it, to understand that that's not, it's not proper, it's not appropriate. And just the other part of that is encouraging the leaders in the community, whether they're faith leaders or board members, people that are out there and engaged and involved in the community. I think it's important to make sure that they're educated on these issues and how people can misconstrue faith to justify their behaviors.
And that was, I agree with what you said. And also, it's very important to, for faith leaders, as I would say, to obtain the knowledge about domestic violence so that they can go back in their community and, reassess things. Because there are a lot of things in our culture that that we do, but is not pertaining to what is in our faith, in our doctrines and or the Bible or the Quran or what in your from God. So it's very important to just be able to have ears open and receptive to, letting people who are expert in this, in the area of domestic violence, come into your community and just share their knowledge. And then after that, without, talking about your doctrine, but just to share their knowledge. And then the faith leaders are very intelligent and professionals. They can take that knowledge into their own community and make those assessments and make those changes themselves. And they have they can do that. They have the capacity to do that, but they need to allow people to come in to share knowledge so they can go into their own individual community and make changes that will be helpful to their parishioners.
Yeah, I think that's really excellent. This is a joint effort, right? And not everyone can come into every community and be trusted. So those partnerships are really critical.
Marshall?
Yeah.
And if I just say one more thing,
Sure,
this
sure.
is a topic that's really, really important to me. So I just thought of one more thing that I think it's important to share, not only, for those of us going back and doing the work with faith leaders, but for those of us who are advocates on this call and on this meeting, where I've had instances where people reach out to me, not understanding or knowing the faith tradition, so then unsure if the person is accurate in using the faith tradition to say, oh, well, this is justified, and I don't want to overstep, and I want to be respectful and mindful of their faith. I've studied this to some degree through my work with the Islamic Seminary, not just the Muslim faith, but other faiths. I've never seen an example where there's really justification. What often happens is there's like a tiny story or tradition that is misconstrued and misinterpreted, and it goes against the vast majority of the faith and the tradition and the sources and resources. So I just think it's important to remind us all that that's the case. People are justifying their behavior, but everyone will try to find an excuse to justify what they want to do.
Absolutely. Thank you for adding that. So I have one more question for you all, and then certainly if there are any questions from the group, want to ask those. But before I do, I just want to do a quick direction here. This is Voices Against Violence is historically our second largest fundraiser here at the YW. And this online version is no exception. And so we're going to drop a link in the chat here. And for those on the call, if you're able to make a contribution to support the YW, we would greatly appreciate it. Obviously, like many nonprofits, we've been directly impacted by coronavirus, but also by dollars that come through legislation that have shrunk or been eliminated. So all of your donations today are going directly to support our domestic violence shelters, both here in Montgomery and Preble County. And I'm going to put that link in the chat. If it doesn't show up as clickable, you can just copy and paste it. It's ywcadayton.org/VAV, Voices Against Violence, donate. Again, it's ywcadayton.org/VAV, donate. And then the second thing I wanted to mention is that we have sessions all day long, and we hope that all of you who are watching now can join us for as many of those as possible. Our next session will be at 9:30 and covering the intersection of domestic violence and immigration. And as Rula mentioned earlier, we know that intersections are messy. And so really there's never one true intersection. And even this session intersects with our next session. So we're excited for that. So before we go, one more question, and then certainly want to cover any questions that come from the attendees this morning. My last question for you is, we know that on average, it takes domestic violence survivors 7 attempts to leave an abusive relationship. So what role does the faith community play in supporting survivors, even if they never leave the situation?
I'll go first. Excuse me. What? Okay, so if first of all, domestic. I think faith communities can, when they get education, they'll understand that, like the fact that we're saying, even if they don't leave the situation, it's not. That's not the ultimate answer. So faith communities, they need to learn about the specifics about domestic violence, because there are so many reasons why a person can't leave when they at the time that you think they should leave. It may not be safe for them to leave. So it's important for faith. That's why it's important for faith leaders and communities to understand this, because of course they love people and they want to help people, right? That's a given. But if you're not informed, then you could be doing damage to people unknowingly, and that's not good. And of course, no faith leader wants to do damage to parishioners. So that it's important to just get the information. You have an obligation to find out what's going on with domestic violence and what that means, because it's so different from what you may be already used to. So I think we have an obligation to find out the information so we can properly address things with our survivors, such as in this example, we may think that they should leave, or that's the ultimate, or you may think that they should stay, because that's your guidelines. I mean, you can have all kinds of ideas of what needs to go on, but it's important to learn about it so you can properly address it and properly assist survivors.
That's powerful, Darlene. The only thing I'd add is, I think it's in the question. I think, Marshall, you asked about what role faith communities can play as well as faith leaders. And I think it's in that word community, to be community for the person who is struggling with this challenge. And we all struggle in different ways. And to me, the sense of community means to stand together and be there for one another and not allow ourselves to be divided by whatever internal challenges that we're facing. And, one of the things that experts teach us is that individuals who are abusers like to alienate people, separate them from families. And I think the faith community's role is really important to continue to stay with the individual. Some of the most beautiful relationships I've witnessed have been friendships of individuals who, by the time they get to me as an attorney, maybe they're at the point where they're taking steps to get out. And I see the sister or the brother that's with that person, not necessarily biological brother or sister, but faith community brother or sister, and how much they stand up and support the person who is moving themselves out of the situation at that point. But there had to be a lot of community during the time where the person, to Darlene's point, was there and was still experiencing the abuse for different reasons, and for all the the many broad reasons that people feel forced to stay, and circumstances sometimes force them into those choices. So I just think community is it, standing with people.
I think those are two powerful closing statements. So thank you both so much for joining us this morning. It's such a treat for us to have you be a part of this event and to share all of your knowledge. Again, for our attendees, if you'd like to make a donation, you go to ywcadayton.org/VAV donate, Our next session is on immigration at 9:30. And lastly, if you are watching and you need support, please feel free to call our hotline at 222-SAFE. Or if you're a community or faith leader and you want to talk more with us about what resources might exist for you, you can email us at info@ywcadayton.org, and we'd love to get you connected with folks like Rula and Darlene. Thank you all so much for joining us. Again, thanks to Rula and Darlene. Thanks to the West Dayton Caravan of Churches for sponsoring this session, and Regal Financial for being our presenting sponsor. We will see you all at 9:30.